Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted proof that spirituality is real and what in the world is consciousness, then do we have the Secret Nature of Matter show for you. Today I'll be talking with Richard Gordon, the best-selling author of Quantum Touch and the creator of the Quantum Touch Healing System and the author of a very special book on consciousness and spirituality, The Secret Nature of Matter. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about the intersection of science and spirituality, about what's really real, how we can prove it, and why it matters in our lives. That plus we'll talk about charged pendants and coins, spooky action at a distance, why in the world total S illusion, what we can learn from Ex Machina, and what in the world cows, doggies, and a little boy have to do with one another. So welcome back to the show, Richard. Are you ready to shine?
Oh, Michael, I'm so glad to be back again. It's such a treat to see you.
It's such a treat to see you as well. And for everybody in video land, we have Devi joining us there as well.
Yeah, this is Devi. And, it seems that when I'm on shows, she just wants to be on my lap and get really busy cuddling. So don't mind her. She's just having a wonderful time.
So it looks like kitty heaven for you there.
Yeah, she's on it. I'm just going to try to keep her from pulling my mic out, but that's another story.
Okay, so let's go from there. Let's go back in time a little bit. Let's go way on back maybe. Did you grow up with very spiritual parents?
No, I grew up with atheists, and I considered myself an atheist until I got to be about 15 or 16. I had a strong sense of personal morality, honesty, integrity, responsibility, compassion. These were all high values to me, and now I see them as spiritual qualities. These were all very important to me, but I didn't see any evidence that there was a spiritual reality, and so I just dismissed it. By the time I got to be about 16, I thought of myself as a non-theist. In other words, I have no interest in the subject, but if God knocks on my door, I'll say hello. But other than that, what's the point? Well, I had so many outlandish experiences that awakened me to the idea that the reality wasn't what I thought it was. And in great retrospect, I realized it was kind of a precursor to what was to follow, what was to come in my life, what was to change. And that's all going to be revealed partly in this conversation.
Yeah, so if we go to maybe 1972 in the hills above Tepoztlan, Mexico, there we go.
Tepoztlan, yes. I was hiking through the hills of Tepoztlan, Mexico, and my friends and I had been hiking for hours. We hiked above the pyramid out into the hills and little tiny town, San Juancito, which wasn't even on the map. And you couldn't get there by car. And we were just kind of tropsing about. And then all of a sudden we see this little tiny man, and he's got this huge smile on his face. And he's waving us like this. And we come up to him. And then he holds out his hand to shake hands with us with the softest hand. And these eyes twinkling and glowing, looking into my eyes, taking my hand and smiling as he shakes my hand. And he says to me these immortal words. He says, "Todo es ilusión." Everything's an illusion. And he repeats it 3 times. And then he says to my friend, and he grabs his hand and holds his hand lightly and says, "Todo es ilusión." Everything is illusion. And then we look at each other and say, "What was that?" And by the time we turned around, he had taken off. He was gone. We don't know what that was. But only many years later did that begin to make greater sense to me.
So he got it.
We got the message, but we didn't understand it, but we got it.
So if we fast forward from there to 1974, you were struggling with your blood sugar, if I understand right, and you ended up almost against your will maybe at Reverend Plume.
Yes, Reverend Plume was a psychic surgeon who worked out of Seaside and Redwood City in California. And 3 of my friends who didn't know each other all suggested that I see Reverend Plume. Well, I didn't believe in spirituality, but I did believe there might be something in coincidence. So I said, what the heck? I got nothing to lose. I'm young and dumb. Let me just go see this guy. He worked with donations only. Actually, it was a small payment or something. And I watched him, and he put his forehead on my chest. He put his forehead on my back. And he's kind of as if he's looking inside me. And his wife says to me, she was delightful, also from England. She says, "Now, you tell the Reverend what you think the matter with you is, but don't worry, he'll figure it out anyway." And so he's looking around, and then he puts a couple pieces of Kleenex on top of my belly. I'm wearing a T-shirt, like a beige T-shirt, and he takes two fingers, and he suddenly thrusts them through the Kleenex, and I hear the Kleenex rip. And I'm thinking, oh, yeah, it's a magic trick. He suddenly bent his fingers down at the last second, so his hand is like this. And I'm thinking, oh, that's kind of a silly trick, play blah, blah, blah. And he had previously rolled up a piece of Kleenex in the shape of like a cigarette, just rolled it all up. And then he takes one of it, he pushed his second hand in as well, and he takes his hand out and he pushes the Kleenex in. I'm seeing reddish brown, wet-looking guts, right? And I'm thinking, holy shit, I better trust this guy. And he puts his other hand in, he's waving around in the Kleenex, and he grabs hold of the Kleenex and he throws it into a wastebasket. And I'm looking at my shirt, there's no blood. I didn't even think of looking at myself. And I was dumbfounded. And then I had pain going up and down my back that evening. And within 2 or 3 weeks, my blood sugar issues were handled. I wasn't having any of the symptoms. And that was another, the other thing that happened was he blew my mind regarding my ideas of spiritual materialism, which is a big theme of the book also. Because before he began doing this thing, he's praying to Jesus, which wasn't really in my belief system. And then afterwards they say, well, if you want to hang out with us, that's fine. We're going to have lunch now. So I'm sitting there with him, just wanting to just take in anything I can. And he's eating a bologna sandwich on white bread. And I'm like, no. I'm thinking he has to have some super special diet and he has to be super reverent and he has to do all the... No, he prays to Jesus and eats bologna on white bread. And my ideas of what spirituality were just got completely blown open about physicality, matter, moving through matter. Anyway, I've had a number of experiences that have opened me up to the possibility that there's more.
So, and you went back and you watched him performing surgery on somebody's neck, I believe it was, the following year.
Yeah, that was about 6 months later. I came back and he worked on me. I don't remember what it was for, but and then I asked his wife, can I watch him work? And she said, yes, if you're very quiet. So she opened the door ajar. I was about 5.5 feet away. By the way, I had perfect vision at the time. And there was another woman watching with me. And he had his back mostly toward us, Reverend Plume. And there was a woman, and she had her hair pulled up, and you could see the back of her neck like this. And he was a little guy, but he had fat fingers. And he takes one finger, and I'm watching it disappear micro inch by micro inch as he's twisting it straight into her neck. And then he takes another finger and puts it in. And he's moving him around kind of aimlessly, like a child at the amusement park with a steering wheel. And then all of a sudden, he pulls his hand out, runs his hand, not touching, but over the area. And you see, he pulls his hand out and pinches first. And there's this red line across. Then he waves his hand over it and turns into like a bruise-looking area. And then he rubs the bruise with his hand and it disappears. And then the Reverend takes a breath, turns around, and releases it like, wow, that was pretty amazing from his point of view, that he actually saw that. This was his reality. He lived in this place where he was doing these psychic surgeries every day.
Wow. So let's fast forward to something else just as interesting. You attended a workshop in 1978 with Robert Rasmussen.
Yes.
What happened there?
Well, this obese man in about 50, 55 years old was teaching a workshop for the very first time. He'd been doing this on his own for over 20 years. He was booked up from like morning till night, just endless sessions. And he was doing a form of hands-on healing. And he told us crazy tall tales, and I couldn't believe a word he was saying. He was saying that Oh, there was the time a woman had a tumor the size of a grapefruit and it melted away in an hour. And then there was the time the child broke his leg and I spent an hour and a half. You could see the bone moving back in and the flesh healing itself. And the next day the child could walk comfortably. And then there was the time, oh, and by the way, I just touched people and the bones moved back into alignment. And I'm thinking, I don't know whose grandpa he is, but I don't trust anything he's saying. I don't think anything he's saying is true. So my girlfriend gets up to the front of the room.
Mm-hmm.
We're all studying her scoliosis of her back. She has a major scoliosis. And he said, well, what I do is I just touch the occiput. That's the bone at the back of the skull.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, see how high it is on this side? And then it just, okay, it's not high anymore. And then I'm watching the hip, and it's totally obvious because I can see it from like 8 feet away where I'm sitting. And the hips just roll back into alignment. And then he's going up and down the spine, and the spine is straightening out. And I immediately assumed he had a rare gift. No one else is ever going to learn it, and certainly not me. But in the course of the day, I saw that I could indeed align the occipital bones. I saw it happen, and I was positive about it. And I took over in his retirement years later. I apprenticed with him, and I gave it a name. I called it Quantum Touch. He had never given it a name at that point. And that was the beginning of the evolution of quantum touch. That's how I first got introduced to the idea of using breathing and body awareness to raise our life force energy, to accelerate the healing process, to let the other person match your vibration. You don't come down to match them. You never get tired or drained. They always come up to match your vibration because you're actively breathing and moving awareness through your body. And we don't call it, by the way, we don't call ourselves healers because we recognize that all healing is ultimately self-healing. And a great healer is someone who was very sick and got well quickly. So we just hold the field and let their body and spiritual intelligence do its own self-healing.
Very, very cool. And so from there, what we're going to talk about today is you have been doing this work for a long time. I believe about 40 years now.
Yep. It's actually over 40 years now.
Holy smokes. You have seen a thing or two, and you understand things from a very different perspective because the impossible, in quotes, is perhaps the daily world that you live in. So I want to dive into science real briefly here.
Certainly.
And ask, what is faith-based science?
Faith-based science is what the scientists generally operate from. They make certain fundamental assumptions that the only things that are real can be described through math and physics. Nothing can exist outside of math and physics. That the mind is confined to the brain. They have great faith that there's no such thing as telepathy or intuition or anything like this. They also operate on faith, since they're coming from that materialistic perspective, that energy healing cannot possibly exist, and that the only things that modern medicine is the only solution that could possibly make any sense. Poisoning the body, hoping to kill the disease before the patient dies. So these are truly faith-based systems, and what's fascinating about it is how difficult it is for Galileo's peers to want to look through his telescope. There's this great quote where he says, "My dear Kepler," his buddy, famous Kepler, he says, "When the learned refuse to look through my telescope, what shall we make of this? Shall we laugh or shall we cry?" And this is exactly what it's like today when I show people that objects can actually hold energy and intention and do things that are considered physiologically impossible. That was a discovery. I'm jumping ahead of the story, but it is like showing people in the time of Galileo something that they don't want to see because the cognitive dissonance is so profound, because it invalidates what they've come to know and believe.
There's a Buddhist professor, and we had a guest on a couple days ago, Jamal Yogis, he's called the Saltwater Buddha. He wrote an amazing book by that title, and he sat in on a class by Uma Thurman's father at Columbia. His name's Robert Thurman, and Robert Thurman was giving the speech talking about, I don't know if theology or Buddhism, about the nature of consciousness, and he asked one simple question. He says, people ask, can you prove that spirituality exists? And I ask, how can you prove it does not?
Well, that's a good question. But I've got a way of, I can't prove that spirituality exists, but I can sure as heck provide a whole lot of evidence that it does.
And let's go down that road. First off, because this is the bias, the faith that we're talking about with science is there's a faith that it couldn't possibly exist, but there's no proof of that either. Let's talk about some things that we can prove. Talk to us about Dr. Tiller and pH in water.
Yeah, Dr. Tiller had people meditate on an object, and he had a materialistic belief that to create an object that would hold consciousness, it had to be some kind of electrical device that was somehow built to be this thing. And people would meditate on this device with the intention of getting it to hold that energy to cause water to shift its pH. And so he put it in a room, had people meditating in the room and on that object, and then he'd leave it in the room with the temperature controlled and pH monitor going all the time, and it moved so much. The odds of it happening by chance were millions to one against that occurring by chance. So that was a really fascinating set of experiments that Professor Tiller did. I actually met with him years ago.
Very cool. And then from there, another one, and we had him on the show, Dean Radin here, about revisiting the double slit experiments.
This, I think, should win him the Nobel Prize myself. That's just my bias. But the famous double slit experiment where you try to decide is light a particle or a wave. If it goes through one slit, it looks like a particle. If it goes through multiple slits, it creates an interference pattern. It looks like a wave. And a lot of people this has been known as the observer effect. But the straight physicists, 99% of the physicists say, well, the observer just means you have a camera to observe. It isn't about a person observing. The New Age people said, no, when you observe something, you collapse the wave. Well, Dean Radin proved it. And the way he did it was he had meditators meditating on the slit of the experiment, and some of them were more able than others at collapsing the wave. But when the machine was just sending the photons through millions of times, never collapsed the wave, but only when the people were meditating did it. So then he wired people up with EEG to find out what their brainwave activity was doing at the moment of the collapse, and he saw there were certain right hemispheric things and certain parts of the brain that were being activated when people were able to collapse the wave, and some people were more skilled than other people, and the odds of this all being chance were billions to one against it. But I'll place the odds now almost that high that Nature or Science magazine is willing to publish his work and acknowledge that the fundamental assumptions of modern science are flawed.
On that note, let's go to Lynn McTaggart.
Oh my goodness. Well, Lynn McTaggart did some really fascinating research with Gary Schwartz, who's actually watching my work right now because we're in contact. We'll get to that later. And what Lynn did was she had thousands of people meditating on one of two leaves. There was just, flip of a coin, chosen which leaf we'll meditate on, and they did. And then they put it in a completely dark room with super high photosensitive film and looked at the bioluminescence that the leaf put out, and it was like massively bright compared to the leaf people hadn't meditated on. So that was a really cool experiment as well.
And then one last one, which is the Global Coherence Project.
Oh, yeah. Well, whenever they've got these random number generators all over the planet, and when a major event happens, like 9/11 or the death of Princess Di, the random number generators kind of go haywire. And instead of just having an equal number of ones or zeros that they're randomly generating, all of a sudden you get a whole lot more one or the other. And it's such a high proportion as to be incredible. But when you look at all these experiments in combination, you're left with the idea that, okay, consciousness is having an effect. And I quoted Bob Dylan in the book, and I said, well, you know something's happening, but you don't know what it is. Well, I was able to focus it and get a much clearer picture of what's happening. And that's where we're leading to.
Yeah, so as we lead in this direction, we often lean on the scientific greats and say it's all about science, it's not about spirituality. But a lot of the scientific greats were very spiritual people, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely part of our history. But that part gets left out of the discussion.
So we can look at Einstein, for instance, somebody who I would consider him almost a sage in his spiritual wisdom.
Yes.
So let's go from there, and let's dive into the heart of things today. You've worked with thousands of people on what's called SPA, Spontaneous Posture Realignment. What is it, and what's going on?
Okay. Well, back in 1978, when Bob Rasmussen aligned my friend Marita, I was astounded because I knew this couldn't happen. When a person is standing and the hips are torqued, so one hip is turned forward, one hip is turned backwards. Usually if you measure, on 80% of the people you measure, your right hand will be high whether you're measuring them from the front or the back. You should feel like you're pressing down on bone or a tabletop. And when they stop, you get your eyes level with your fingers. That's how you measure. And you just look. And if it looks like this hand is high. It's Sesame Street, right? And now they're level, high, level. So I watched that happen on her, and I was always impressed that I could run the energy of basic quantum touch and move the hips. Then about 8 years ago, I wrote a book called Quantum Touch 2.0, The New Human. And somewhere like in chapter 17 or 19, I had a chapter called Visible Magic. And in Visible Magic, I noticed that I discovered through a friend that if I meditated on a bone behind the nose and eyes called the sphenoid bone, that I could intend it to move back into alignment, and instantly the occiput, the cranial bones, would become level, and the hips would untwist, and it would be pretty much permanent for the rest of a person's life. It would take 7 or 8 seconds. I got to show this to Rupert Sheldrake, one of my heroes, on his wife Jill. Her hip was so far out. He said, "Looks like there's been an accident." She said, "Yeah, I had some crushed vertebrae years ago." And I said to Rupert, who was measuring her, going, "Oh my goodness, it's very far off." I said, "I only expect this to go about 75% back in the next 6 or 8 seconds while she's standing." And it went from that far off to about that far off, because that's
3 or
as far
4
as
inches to like half an inch.
Yeah, it went from about 3 inches down to about 3/4 of an inch. Just doink, like that. And Rupert completely saw it, and saw it on other people too. So the idea that we can align people spontaneously was a way for me to test out the theory of whether or not consciousness could be held. Well, first, let me tell you how I got here.
Yeah, please do.
Jumping ahead of myself. I get so excited. I was at a Thanksgiving party, Thanksgiving 2015, and my friend said one little thing to me. He said, "You know, Richard, I found if you make a movie of yourself doing a healing session, people watching the movie will get healed." I thought, no way, come on. He said, "No, test it." Well, I tried testing it, but I didn't really know how to test it. Maybe it'll make somebody's headache go away, but people say things all the time, and you don't really know if the headache really went away. So I then remembered that I know how to align the hips and the occiput. So I made a movie of myself meditating on my phone, and I showed it to people, and their hips instantly straightened out, and the cranial bones straightened out. I go, wow, that's pretty amazing. So then I thought, well, what if I just do a screenshot of the movie? And I show people the screenshot. That worked. Well, what if I take the picture of the screenshot into Photoshop and make it really small and take out the color and put it through my printer? That worked too. And now I'm like, wait a second, this is crazy. I was sitting at the Bulletproof Cafe in Santa Monica, Dave Asprey's shop, and I had just played golf in the morning, had the same sweater on, and I realized in my pocket I had a golf tee. I thought, I wonder what would happen if I meditate on the golf tee to give it the information and intention of untwisting somebody's hips and occiput. and I meditated on the golf tee for 6 or 7 seconds, and I measured somebody, handed them the golf tee, and they were straightened out. I go, oh my God, now I'm in deep water. I ran 58 or 57, I don't remember, 57, I think it's 58 experiments to test out when it worked and when it doesn't work, what was causing it. And I came across these really interesting anomalies. For instance, what would happen if I meditate on water?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if people take a sip of the water or even just stare at the water, it can untwist their posture. Now, what's good about the posture is it's physiologically impossible. No one can untwist it themselves. No one can. And the physiologists think the cranial bones are fused together since you're an adult. Like a helmet, they call it. So if I can do two impossible things, that's a yes. And if they don't happen, it's a no. So I wanted to make sure I wasn't fooling myself. And I went to a friend who had a massage table at a Whole Foods market.
Mm-hmm.
And massage chair, I should say. And I handed him a quarter that I'd meditated on, and he put it on a shelf. And then people would come over, I'd measure them, I'd walk around the corner, and then come back 40 seconds later and try to guess, did he hand them the quarter or didn't he? And I'm right every single time immediately. It takes less than 2 seconds to know. The hip is high, the hip is level. And that was a process. And so I started testing it, all kinds of things. But to get back to the water, because I jumped story on you here for a second, what I found was if I boiled the water
Mm-hmm.
and let the water cool, would it still hold the energy and tension? Yes, it did. Didn't matter. But what about the water that had collected at the lid of the pot? I collected it in a little vial, handed it to people. It didn't work. What about water that turns to ice? It loses the information. What about ice that turned to water? It held the information. I'm not here to explain it, but I got to test a ton of things. And then came the great discovery of Experiment 38.
Tell us about Experiment 38.
Well, actually, 37 was what led me to it. In Experiment 37, I'm trying to figure out how to make this fail. I tried to see how you can erase information from objects. Like I take a brass coin, mm-hmm. and I'd meditate on and hand it to somebody. It certainly worked. Then I'd smash it with a hammer until there was just nothing left of it almost. Still worked. God, how do you get rid of I tried meditating on it, tried baking it in the oven, I tried putting fire underneath it. Nothing would make the information go away. It's very stable. Then I tried something else. There was a woman, we were at Bulletproof again. This is where it happened again. And she had her back to this long table.
Mm-hmm.
And I measured her. She was uneven, very far. I laid out about 15 pennies about 3 or 4 inches apart from one another. And then I meditated on penny number 1, which was mm-hmm. right behind her. And the last penny was like 4.5 feet away. I measured her again to make sure I hadn't accidentally aligned her with my mind, and I hadn't. Then I handed her penny number 15, and she was instantly untwisted, and I got angry. And I thought, why is this happening? This shouldn't happen. I only meditated on penny 1. Why is penny 15 charged? Well, my first thought was the energy and tension spreading like fire moves across gasoline? Well, if that was true, then the table would be charged, and the walls and the floors and the windows and everybody in the coffee shop and then everybody on the planet. And I knew that hadn't happened. So, okay, dismiss that one. Well, I came up with a new theory, and the new theory I called hypothesis was conscious entanglement. So the very next day, I was at a conference, and I met 2 women who had a very easy to measure pelvic torsion, mm-hmm. and I borrowed some change because I'd been meditating on change a long time. I didn't want to use any of my own because I don't trust my own change because it gets all tangled with each other. And I looked at the change and I entangled it in my mind. That simply means that I meditated on it for a while and joined them all together in my mind. I put them on a table. I handed each of the women one of the coins. I took out a charged coin from my pocket, and I tapped one of the coins on the table, and both women were immediately untwisted. And I was very impressed. But then I had to do the experiment in reverse.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at my favorite raw food restaurant in town. It's no longer open, but it was wonderful. And I met a woman I hadn't seen in a long time. And what I did was I said, put your change on the table. But I didn't ask her to look at it or give any attention to it. And I said, now pick up one of the coins. And I went over and I tapped one of the coins, and she was still twisted. I got so excited because I got to play the experiment so that it would work and so that it wouldn't work. And then I had other people do the entanglement. I ran all these experiments many, many times to make sure I wasn't fooling myself. And the idea of conscious entanglement is when you group objects together in your consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
anything that happens to any one of these objects will happen to all of them. And that led me to the discovery of what I call the quantum touch pendant. Yes. So
I'm holding it up here.
in gold or silver here. Yes.
Very nice.
And what I first did was I had them manufactured, I joined them together in my mind, I put my best healing energy intent into the pendant, and then I sent a gift out to my top 50 instructors around the world. We've got practitioners in over 50 countries, we've got instructors around the world. And I said, put your best healing energy into your pendant. And before we knew it, we had sold out all 1,000 we had manufactured. These people just blasted the energy in. And so we started manufacturing more, and we sold over 3,000 now. And you've got all these incredible healers and lovers of life infusing their pendant with their best healing energy. And I didn't realize it at the time how powerful a healing device this would turn into. I didn't know what this was. I just knew it was a really cool thing. And I put the SPA intention into it, so if you touch somebody with it, with intention, it'll untwist their posture.
I like the key word in there is with intention. You just can't go blankly up to somebody and go bling, bling, bling.
You actually could, because if that was your intention, it would actually work. But here's the cool thing. If I hand somebody the pendant to look at, say, oh, that's really pretty, let me look at this thing, it's really nice.
Yeah.
It doesn't untwist their posture. But if I have any intention whatsoever that I'm tapping them with it for that purpose, just like that, it does it. So when I was at the University of Hong Kong and the University of Macau giving keynote addresses, I'd have 20, 25 people on stage. I'd have people measuring them. Then, to create an artificial conscious entanglement without having to do any work myself, I had them all hold hands.
Cool.
So they all know they're touching somebody else. So they create the entanglement, not me. And then I take, this is before I had a pendant, I took a charged coin from my pocket, and I just ever so slightly brushed it for a split second across the first woman's hair. Just a few hairs. All 25 people are untwisted simultaneously.
What does this mean for us?
What does it mean? It means that well, there's so many ways of going to this one. It strongly suggests that we live in a spiritual reality. It means that our mind is not confined by our brain. It means that our love has impact. It means that we don't know the potential of who and what we are and what we can become. It opens the door to a new science of consciousness. It means that we are ready to discover worlds of human possibility that have been closed to us because the assumptions of materialistic science refuse to allow the possibility that we are more than we've been taught that we are.
So, thank you. From there, I want to talk about your book is beautiful, and you talk about, at one point, 6 old assumptions and 5 proposed new laws of matter and consciousness. I'm not going to put you on the spot with them, but I will go over a few highlights with you.
Sounds great.
The first one is, we live in a mechanistic universe, and everything real can be explained through math and physics. I think you're already blowing a hole out of that one.
Yeah, just the fact that SPA exists means that you can't put anything in an equation that I just did. There's no math, there's no physics to explain it because it's considered impossible. And so there's no explanation. And once you move, as silly as it may seem, well, I'm going to untwist people to prove that quantum theory is incomplete and that mind affects matter. Yeah, all that's done through something as silly as untwisting posture.
How would you say quantum physics is incomplete?
Well, quantum physics is still materially based. It's still based on matter being separate from mind. But the implication is that all matter is made of subatomic God stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Quantum theory does not include anything about consciousness. Quantum theory is just how matter interacts with matter, but it does not say that you can put consciousness into an object and have that object hold the energy and intention. This is like a foreign language, and it drives the physicists nutso, and their cognitive dissonance is off the charts when you show them something that they know can't be true,
mm-hmm.
and most cases they run away. And sometimes they're open-minded and say, well, show me more. And sometimes they just react in fear and get angry and dismissive. It's really fascinating. But it's kind of like a Galileo story.
Well, you were talking with me earlier off air about a story. You said it's happened to you at least several different times where you are at a convention and there's a gentleman. Well, you take it from there. Brief versions.
Well, here's a couple real brief ones. A guy says to me, well, you said you could move occipital bones with a light touch. And I said, yeah. He said, well, I have a PhD in physiology and I know it's impossible. I said, oh, I'm so glad to meet you. Come, like spider to the fly, come here. And I find someone whose occipital ridge is so far out, it's undeniable. You lift up on it's soft tissue and you lift up on the base of the skull and you look at it and one thumb is massively. So he measures and I said, what do you see? And he says, high on the right. I said, how high? Because I wanted him to double check. And he said, at least 3/8 of an inch, but it might be more than that. I said, that's exactly what I see. And so I touch it very lightly. This is before I knew about meditating. And for about 3 seconds, just very light touch, I said, check it now. And he measures and he measures and he remeasures and he's putting his hands on over and over. And he says, well, it looks even. I said, do you have any interest in researching this? He said, no, I work on amphibians. And then he just turns around and walks away. You can see this tail doing this on the way out. Then there was another time I was at the Science of Consciousness conference in Tucson. And a guy, my friend Chris, who's a scientist, made a big sign for me and it said, consciousness affects matter, free demo. And everybody, most of the people at the conference are trying to figure out how to get a computer to act like a human brain. Mm-hmm. They're not interested in what consciousness is. They just want to see if they can get a machine that's self-conscious. They're very far away, by the way. And he says, all right, what do you got? His head tilted, his arms crossed. I said, well, I'm going to untwist your hips without touching you. He said, well, that's impossible. I said, great, hold that thought. And I said, let me measure you. Oh, my goodness, your hips are like further out than almost anybody I've ever seen in my life. I said, to make it hard on me, why don't you lock your hips? So he's standing tight. I meditate, and I measure and say, oh, look, you're completely even now. 7 seconds later, he said, well, of course, you used reverse psychology on me. And I said, well, that's an interesting hypothesis. Do you consider yourself an empirical scientist or faith-based? Now, that's a rude question. He said, well, empirical, of course. I said, great. Then why don't you watch me do this 6 or 8 more times and see if I'm using reverse psychology? And he said, if I let myself believe this just happened, everything I know about science would fall like a house of cards. Well, as an empirical scientist, don't you want to let the cards fall where they will? And he thought for a moment and he said, not today. And he just walks away. And that's the end of the conversation. So the empirical scientist says, I don't want to look at this.
Let's go from there. Let's talk about a few more of these. Thank you for sharing. And then we're going to talk about some proposed new laws. First off, and we had Eben Alexander on a couple times a year or so ago on the show. We were talking about the brain and consciousness. And so number 2 here on the list is the brain is a physical thing that generates consciousness.
Yes. Well, maybe it's more, maybe the brain isn't just a generator of consciousness, it's more like a radio that sends and receives consciousness. And we can project our consciousness, and it actually has a physiological impact on other people, and who knows what else. I said in the book, it's sort of like I found a little keyhole through which I could observe the mysteries of the reality, but I've only made it out as far as the mailbox, and now I'm letting other people catch up to all my discoveries. And by the way, you can repeat all my experiments in my book yourself, and then take it further than I've ever taken it, because I just opened the door to the mystery.
Beautiful. Let's go from there. Let's dive into 5 new proposed laws. First off, psychic abilities do exist.
Yeah. Well, the fact that you can align people without touching them, bingo. That's just visible, immediately the case.
And then number 2, focused energy and intent follows thought and has a physical impact on people and matter.
SPA, spontaneous postural alignment, demonstrates that one.
All matter can hold and store energy and intent.
Yeah, that's one of the great pieces from all the information that I gathered. It didn't matter if you were running energy into water, leather, plastic, old cigarette butts, leaves, pebbles. All matter holds consciousness equally. And I like to say that all matter is made of subatomic God stuff. That's a very technical scientific word, by the way, God stuff.
Well, it's really cool because if you think about it, we are, according to a good quantum mechanist, 99.9, if I get this right, 99.9934% nothing.
No, it's got I think it's got 8 nines in a row. It's 99.999999999, then 3-4% nothing. If you were going to create matter from nothingness, you'd want to have it almost entirely nothing. And so the illusion that when scientists do the when Einstein called it spooky action at distance, you had entangled photons or electrons that were separated at great distance. And when you observe one, instantly the other one changed. And Einstein hated this. He called it spooky action at a distance. Well, this drives great thinkers like Elon Musk to say that we must live in a hologram. We live in an illusion, a projected reality. But because he's a materialist, and bless him, I'm very happy with his work, but he's a materialist, and so he thinks the only way this could be a hologram is if it's being projected by aliens or future humans.
That we're in, just to say for everybody out there, because this has been floating around and as of late has gained one heck of a head of steam, that we're living in a simulator, in a simulation.
The whole simulation theory, and I would argue contrary, that no, it's not a simulation by advanced aliens, but it is an illusion. Or humans. Can you imagine advanced humans want to create the past so we can see Honey Boo Boo, Donald Trump, and the Kardashians? And you're advanced humans and you want to create the silliness of us being... No. It's an illusion because it's a spiritual reality. And all of this is Maya, the Vedanta speaks of. That's why it's an illusion, not because it's a projection from advanced aliens or humans. That's what it's really about.
That gets into, okay, let me have you, for people who haven't heard episodes on this, what's Maya and why would you say, I've got to throw a big one at you, but why would you say we're here?
Well, I personally, and this isn't anything I can prove, I think we're here to grow spiritually, to learn how to deal with the contrasting reality of our time and place, how to learn to love, how to learn to transform. The evolution of all species moves to compassion. The animals that we appreciate the most, the dolphins and the horses and the dogs and the cats and the bonobo monkeys, and what do these have in common? They all show a high level of compassion. Compassion is the ability to sense the suffering of another and to do something to alleviate the suffering. Even rats have shown an ability to care for another rat who's suffering, and even some politicians. But in the evolution of consciousness, what we see is that all beings move toward a higher level of compassion. Well, if that's where we're going, what does the future look like? The future of humanity is we cannot possibly have war in the future because war is not sustainable. Either we'll figure it out or we'll destroy ourselves. There's no in between. So there won't be any war in the future because either there won't be humans or there won't be war. It's inevitable that we will move toward a spiritual evolution of consciousness, and that's where we're heading. And everything about the experiments that I did showed that focused and amplified love had a profound physiological impact on other people. Love is the common denominator, the carrier frequency, like water is the common denominator of matter, of all life. Well, love is the common denominator, and you can see this in nature. You see endless videos online about wild animals that would never receive any affection, like an eel or a tortoise, or what. For thousands of generations, no one was affectionate with any of the eels or tortoises, and somebody's got a video camera and they're petting it, and it becomes all cuddly like a pussycat. And you realize that love communicates to all beings. And that is the carrier frequency that we put into the pendants, and it's the carrier frequency that lets the healing be accelerated with quantum touch.
It's fascinating, and I want to ask you how we can use this in our day-to-day world, this understanding we're gaining here. In general, I have a beautiful crystal here that I have in my hands during the show, and I'm running my thumb over it, literally sending love. I send love to my guest to help connect us, to entangle us. I haven't used that term before, but to entangle us during the show. Today, I have been using your pendant to do the same, which it has a beautiful feeling, I can sense a charge to it, a softness, a kindness. So I'm wondering how we take this, other than sending people love during an interview, how do we take this learning, this understanding we're getting here today, and use this in our, dare I say, our day-to-day lives?
Yeah. When we appreciate the power of our love, then we make it a priority and we utilize it. Now, I created these pendants as a group talisman. So they would become more powerful every single day. As more people meditated on it, it just gained more and more strength on a daily basis. And then I was shocked when I was in Cancun, Mexico, because I'm sitting with this guy on the last night of this 5-day retreat, and this Italian fellow was saying, I haven't breathed through my right sinus since I was a teenager. Mm-hmm. He's probably in his mid to late 30s. And he said, because he used to get into fights as a teenager. And I said, well, here's 2 pendants. Hold them on both sides of your nose. And he's holding them there. And within 5 minutes, he said, I can breathe through the right sinus. And then another woman's watching this, and she goes, well, I have TMJ. So she holds the pendants over her TMJ, and her jaw opens up. And another woman says she has TMJ, and she does the same thing. What we're seeing is that people can use these objects. They can hold it in their hand and infuse it with their love, but every single person on the planet with one of these is going to feel that love also. And so this becomes a shared object that people can utilize to accelerate the healing process. I was taking a walk with a friend of mine, and he said that he had smashed his toe in the morning, and he didn't think he could walk any further with me because his toe was hurting so much. I said, well, take your pendant and put it on your toe. He said, really? I said, yeah. So he puts the pendant on his toe, and he says, within seconds, he said, my whole toe is vibrating and tingling like crazy. Within 2 or 3 minutes, he said, I can walk again. And 2 or 3 minutes after we start walking, he said, I can't even feel my toe now. We are seeing phenomena that I had never anticipated when I created these pendants. But what's cool is that it's a way for people to share their love directly and also experience healing, because a lot of people are using it on themselves or other people for healing during sessions.
I put on my coach's hat. My other career is a coach. We put on my coaching hat during every show, and I'm trying to think, how can we use this information to help people beginning today? Would you have,
Right.
based on what you're sharing today, would you have one homework assignment that you could give people
Sure.
to begin today?
Yeah. If you think about it, let's go around the bush, but get to the center in a second. If you think about it, who hurt you the most in your life was somebody who made you feel like your love wasn't valuable.
Mm-hmm.
They made you feel like your love didn't matter, that your love didn't have any impact. That's who always hurts us the most, is those messages. So the homework is to let yourself soften up inside, feel your heart chakra, and realize your love has impact. Your love is valuable to yourself and to others. Your love truly matters. This is the opposite of the martyr message. The martyr is always feeling unappreciated, misunderstood, self-pity, self-importance. We don't know anybody like that in the culture these days. But they're always feeling unappreciated and unfairly treated, overburdened, and all that kind of stuff. But what you can do is you can turn it around by just really going inside and feeling your love is valuable. Your love has impact. Your love truly matters. It's a unique quality of love. You see, everybody's love is kind of like a bouquet of flowers, but they're all a little bit different. Some people's love is very protective. Some people are very nurturing. Some people are very exuberant. There's so many different qualities, like bouquets of flowers. But when we join them together into a shared talisman, a quantum touch pendant, what happens is now we take the whole bouquet of humanity flowers and we can meditate on something like this. And you can ask, what is the energy and essence of self-love? What is the energy and essence of healing? And pull in that energy and essence to you as a way of drawing it in.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Jessica always likes me to ask, just before we get to the end, a question for parents to help with their kids. What can we do to help kids either get an understanding of this or to be able to crank up their own open-heartedness and self-love?
I would have them start playing with basic quantum touch. There's the breathing and the sweeping. What you do is you're moving awareness through your body. And by the way, we're giving away an entire quantum touch video workshop when people buy my new book. We'll tell about that in a moment. But I have a friend whose daughter was having very low self-esteem. I was visiting him yesterday. And Izzy, as she's known, Isabella, she's has some low self-esteem issues. But Dad wasn't feeling well. And he's taught her how to do the breathing and sweeping. And so she's putting her hands on Dad and she's focusing. He said, oh my God, I feel my whole belly heating up. I feel the heat coming in. And she's like all proud because now she's actually giving some very powerful healing and love. And it's one way for children to build self-esteem. We realize, of course, that self-esteem comes from internally sourced honesty, integrity, responsibility, and trust. These are the 4 pillars of internally based self-esteem. And self-esteem is love you earn from yourself for yourself. So it's kind of a long story, but that's kind of an essence picture of where we can go with that.
It makes me, it's maybe a rabbit hole we don't need to go down today, be a topic for another time, but with those parameters, and we're told to please others and to meet other standards and to obey others' rules, we internally have a self-conflict, which makes it very difficult to love ourselves.
Well, for many people, it is the ultimate obstacle because people can be so self-critical of themselves. I'm critical of myself if I'm 5 minutes late or 10 minutes late for an appointment, but I give everybody permission to be 20 minutes late. That's okay with me. But I'm harder on myself in some ways than I would be on other people. And we need to have that compassion to ourselves that we're really honestly trying to do our best, that we're trying to operate with that integrity and that responsibility. And you notice that when people are really hurting, that's when they're looking for the outside validation as a source of self-esteem. Do I look pretty? Am I okay? Because if they're not expressing the anger or the honest emotion, they've lost the honesty, which means they don't have the integrity, which means they can't be responsible, then they don't trust themselves. So they all link together. Honesty is the core element that allows for self-esteem to exist, because with the honesty, then you can have the integrity and the responsibility and the trust as the four pillars of internally based self-esteem.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. From there, just a few quick wrap-up questions, then time for a brief meditation. First off, what personally brings you the greatest happiness, or what I call the woohoo factor?
It's when I'm connected to Source, when I'm feeling most connected to my reason for being here, for the love of the spirituality, God, Goddess, all that is, infinite, whatever. That's really what it's all about. It's living your purpose. It's being connected to Source. That's what I see as being the thing that really connects me. That's the woohoo of all woohoos.
I would give that a woohoo
Yes,
plus.
definitely.
We'll give that a woohoo plus. So from there, where can people go to find out more, to find your book? And you mentioned some bonuses if people purchase the book.
Yeah, we've got
right
a lot
now.
of bonuses. We're really wanting this book to change the world, to change the dominant belief in the world. So we're just going bending over to get people copies of it. If people buy this book, they can go to a website called thesecretnatureofmatter.com, which is the title of the book. And if you buy one copy, you can choose either the entire Quantum Touch video workshop program, which we've always sold for $97, and don't watch it alone, watch it with friends, because you won't know how good it is unless you actually test it on other people. Then, or you can download what we sell for $147, which is The Art of Youthing, slowing, stopping, or potentially reversing the aging process. And for those wondering, I'm going to turn 70 next year.
Wow.
And so there's no part of me that buys into it. I'm hitting the golf ball farther than I ever have in my life. I'm the best I've ever been. I have no aches and pains. I'm not on any medication. So I'm sharing things that I've been working with for 20, 30, 40 years on this. And if people buy 2 copies of the book, you can download both of them. And so give one to a friend. So quantumtouch.com is our website. The Secret Nature of Matter is where you get the bonuses. And we're also giving people $30 off should they choose to buy a pendant. So that's another bonus. And there's another bonus in there too about a course in building psychic abilities. So we just wanted to give as much as we could to get the word out there that this is a new reality that we live in.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Any last words of wisdom you want to share with people today?
I would just say that be open to the possibility that your love is more than you ever imagined. Now, we all get caught in our world and our little dramas and the things that we do, but underneath all that conditioning, all that trauma, all that pain, you know, if you're really honest with yourself, that there's a spark inside that loves so purely and deeply and powerfully. And if you can get in touch with that and let it come out, let it shine, even just for a moment a day, let that out. Let it out into your world. Let it out into yourself where you can appreciate who you really are. Not who you've been told you are, but who you really are. Then, well, that's what is going to take us into a new future.
Amen to that. Do you have a brief meditation that you wouldn't mind sharing with us?
I'd love to share it. What I'm going to have you do is put your awareness in your heart chakra. You might put your hand over your chest and feel your heart chakra and feel what it's like physiologically to love, to adore, to cherish, to care, to feel loved, and breathe into it and let that feeling, doesn't have to have a thought behind it, but just that feeling of what it's like to have that cherish, adoration, love, gratitude, all those kinds of feelings, and breathe into it and let it expand in your chest. Let it get bigger and bigger as you breathe into it. Just gently getting larger and glowing. Let that have a glow. It could be gold or white or any color you like, but just let it glow in your chest and feel it glowing. Now I'm going to add a little energy to you, and I'm going to first imagine all the people who will see this, and I'm going to entangle you together in my mind like this. I'm going to add a little bit of energy to your heart chakra. Like this. Here we go. Nice. We're going to expand it like that. Getting bigger. And then we'll move it up and down the spine, through the top of the head. Now, okay, that was a real cool little blast. So what I'd suggest you do is you watch that blast over and over again, because you're gonna get that download. So you can rewind that little section and loop it for yourself. That's a nice bit of energy there.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, it has been a lot of fun having you on the show, Richard. For everyone out there, check out our previous interviews so that you can find out about quantum touch as well, and certainly hop on over to Richard's website. I cannot thank you enough for the work you're doing, for being here, for the entangled particles you're putting out into the world, and for everything.
Well, it's my joy to connect with you, and thank you, Michael, again for having me. This is one of my most fun interviews ever.
Woohoo!
Woohoo!
Thank you so much, Richard. It's going to help a lot of people today.
I hope so.
So for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get the secret nature of matter, and discover the nature of reality for yourself. And shine bright. Woohoo!
Anyway, I really love being on your show. You're the best at what you do. It's really good.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it so much. You do such a good job of bringing out the story.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!